313, subsection 3. I guess in both, no?
Okay, so about him, a courtyard that's behind houses, that's not made for frequent entering and exiting. Tadir, it's not usual for that to happen. If the guy made a door, if somebody made a door, liftacha or shetoila, basically for an opening to this courtyard, and shetoila ba mechatzeles shelkonim, and he hung a mat made of reeds on it. And also a gap that he closed with thorns, like a door. So there was a gap, and he kind of put thorns in front of it to kind of make a door. Im yesh lahem tzir, if there's a hinge, pirush, meaning tzir neikvin hadeles, a hinge that goes through the door, by eitz chad lakan, lakan. There's a hinge that goes through the door and has a sharp piece of wood attached to it that can be inserted into the ground to swing back and forth, here and there. Even if they do not have a hinge right now, but they used to have a hinge. Even if they, like a dowel, right? But it's into the ground.
Nigrod is, I think, schleps, it drags it.
Oh, they scrape the ground, right. So you can lock it even if it scrapes the ground, as long as Raksha Kishram Utlam, as long as he tied and suspended them, held them, Linel Bahem, for locking, for usage of locking. It's not considered baina, like baina shenikarahem, that it's recognizable in them, that it's a door. This is clearly a door. This isn't some sort of construction project. Kivan shahaya lahem tzir, because there is a hinge, so that makes it clear this is a door. This is not the construction of a wall happening. So that Amma comments, the call shekain, and certainly, im yesh lehem tzir, if there's a hinge, adayin, still there, if they still have a hinge, but he should, so certainly if they still have a hinge, meaning we just said, so it's clear that it's a door because it used to have a hinge, and certainly if it still has a hinge, but he should not put the hinge back.
Right. I guess when you're putting the thing, when you're just closing it with a door and it has hinges, the hinges are a sign that this was a door, and that's why I'm not. The problem is if you now take this, so on the one hand the hinge signifies it's a door, but you have to be careful with the hinge, because at the same time if you insert the hinge, then you're building, you're putting you're putting a door in, because a hinge is made to be permanent. There, it's made to stay there.
Sounds like an 8th grade riddle of some sort. When is a door not a door?
Yeah.
When is a hinge not a hinge?
When does a hinge help the door, and when does it hurt the door?
When does it make it a door? When does it shabachol door of a door? I don't know.
Door. Yeah.
Okay. So, sorry.
So that was drama. Then again.
So fine. So if there's no hinge, and there wasn't a hinge, it's not now, there never was a hinge. Right. He can't lock them. Except if they're high up off the ground, if they're raised off the ground.
Right.
And an opening is made for coming and going. And so then it's for regular entering and exiting. So then he can lock it. Even though there was never a hinge, and its tack is still scraping. But if it's very clear, this is the kind of opening. Basically, first of all, the thing is raised off the ground. Meaning the door is not totally resting on the ground. So even though it's scraping along the ground, but it's not resting. I mean, I guess its weight could still be on the ground if it's scraping. Yeah, but the idea is that it's not. Like, for example, you see by certain long fences. Hold on, I have a perfect example. There's certain long fences My fence, actually, the way we built it, I had
Like
wanted a
tilt
big
down a little
long
bit.
one. But yeah, but the guy who built it, he was saying, a little advertisement for David DeRay, did a great job. But he said, if you have a long fence, first of all, it's going to be leaning just the weight of the fence. It'll be scraping along the ground the whole time, and eventually, because it's leaning that way, because of the weight, the hinge is going to bend, and it's going to cause problems.
Yeah,
He said, better make the opening for the driveway smaller and do two half-size things. But basically, but you do see that still, some of these long fences that are kind of leaning. So it's its weight is resting on the ground, Taka. And if it was dirt, it'd be scraping along.
Yeah.
But Lamaisa, it's a fence. It's clearly a door, and it's it's built for regular
use.
People come in and out.
Not to be mistaken as something else.
This isn't some wall that technically opened. Like
I mean,
I have to say,
essentially, this is a continuation of the last one. The last one we were talking about, in other words, that you have different kinds of locks. So to what degree does it look like baina, and therefore it's a problem, or less of a problem? And here it's the same idea. We're talking about doors. It's the same idea of at what point does it look like baina? At what point does it not look like baina?
Right. At what point does it go? Well, what's interesting is one thing I think of. First, I was going to say it as a joke, but then I realized, on a serious note, what do they call them? Those like secret bookshelves. That secretly.
Oh, you mean the bookshelves that hide that are really an entrance?
Yeah. Especially for a lot of them, because they don't move a lot, so they scrape along the floor. They're up against the floor, right? So there's no gap, so it looks like it's a clean bookshelf. Scrapes along the floor. A lot of times it's not. You don't have a dirt floor, okay? So usually it's just dust or a rug that it's moving, but it's not made to look like a regular door. You don't have. There are hinges because it has to move. Well, sometimes it's not hinges. Sometimes it's on a track, so it slides.
Right. So it looks like you're opening a door, a bookshelf. It looks like you're moving a bookshelf.
Yeah, but Lamaisa, it's built as a doorway for people to come and go. Even if it's not, I mean, what's interesting about Tadir, I wonder if there's a frequency of time of usage, or if it's just it's built in a way that
I wonder if Mishna Berura is going to talk, because I don't know if he does, but that would be right. What does it mean frequently? Like, what does it mean regularly? Like, how often are we talking here?
Well, that's what I'm saying. One's a doorway, not a doorway. It doesn't matter if you don't usually, like, especially in Pittsburgh, let's say, a lot of front doors are on these steep hill of stairs. If there's a back alley, the family, especially if that back alley actually has walkability to the shul, like a flatter, no one's ever using that front door except for the poor mailman or some delivery guy who doesn't know better, so. But it still needs a mezuzah, and it's still the main. It's still, especially if it's built as the main door, and the back door is just some side, kitchen door, or whatever. It's still the main door, and I think even for the bracha lemaisa, you should be making it on that door post.
Right. I mean, I guess there's two questions there. There's one of the usage of where do you come and go. You can really come and go from the back, so that's really. But at the same time, from the recognizability of the building.
The way it's built,
ask anybody on the street, where's the front door? He'll point you to the top of the stairs on the steep side and say, "Here, there's the top of the front door."
So that's what I'm saying. I wonder if Tadir is taka by just how does this household use this doorway, or how many people you have to have a counter? Okay, there's 5.
No, but maybe that's why he's talking about this storage. Maybe that's why he's talking about this storage area versus why the house. So he's talking
about. That's what I'm saying. It seems to be more about the construction of it than the usage.
Right.
All the details we've mentioned so far is about just how it's built.
The front house door, it's obvious that's a door either way, Mustama.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's very clear it's a door.
Right. Whereas in the back,
that's what I'm saying. So even
not, maybe it's part of your fence. So it doesn't. So maybe you're building maybe as opposed to making a door on the fence or opening and closing your door on the fence. You're really So yeah.
That's what I'm saying. With this secret doorway, let's say the secret bookshelf, the moving bookshelf. Even it's not on hinges or whatever. I think Lamaisa, it's built to have a doorway behind it and such. It doesn't matter if the guy doesn't go regularly. It still is the entrance to his bat cave. It's still built to be an entrance. So, yeah,
you're right.
It's a doorway. It's not. You don't have to consider it binyan, and you don't have to consider binyan every time you close it or whatever. Oh no, I just finished up closing the room. I just finished building the room. I put up a wall. I put up this bookshelf. No, it's
right. Not only that, but also in that case, it's dafka. This case here, where we're specifically talking about a door that's not connected, that's not on it's not connected with its hinges. If it's connected to hinges, you don't have a problem. The problem is the door fell off.
Well, I think also, well, I'm not so sure. The dafka you're saying about the connection, I thought it's because
No,
a
look.
hinge shows.
No, it's not. But it's not about if the hinge is there or not. In other words, it's not. He's not talking about a hinge that's connected. He's talking about a hinge that's hanging on this door that fell off. So the fact that it has a hinge or there was a hinge makes it obvious that this is that door that fell off, and you're just using that door now. In other words, a regular door that swings that's attached is no problem at all. That's obvious. It's a door. The problem here is what happens if it's not an area that maybe would or wouldn't have a door. It's not clear, right? Because it's not used often. It's like a yard storage thing. It's not like a regular door. And B, the door is off, so it looks like you're taking a board. Or alternatively, like the Rama was saying, if you insert those hinges, it looks like you're installing a door. Or it looks like if it doesn't have hinges and never had hinges, it looks like you're building a wall.
Gotcha.
Where okay, on the front door of a house, you don't have really have that problem. Plus, on a door that's connected, you don't have that problem. It's a door. You can open and close any door you want. Right. The problem is, what if you're now taking a piece of wood and putting it on in this gap? That's not obvious. That A is not obvious, and B, it's not connected, so it's furthermore not obvious. If it's on that same place and it's on a hinge and it opens and closes, fine, door, So he looks like he's talking about the words where it's disconnected. Dafke.
Gotcha.
Meaning the fact that it has hinges, he's talking about that there are hinges, but they're not. But the hinges are not. It's not in the hinges. It's not. In other words, or in his case, where the hinges is like the peg that goes in the hole that it swings on, so it's not in the hole. Anyways, tadir, Mishna Berura Chav Gimel, tadir on a regular basis. Meaning that it's not made to be opened besides for on rare occasions. Why? Because it's not the regular way to go in and go out of there. It's not a very used place. It looks like he's adding on to the building when he's closing this door. Unless it's in the ways that are explained here. The Oz minkar shem dalas, that in those cases it is recognizable that it is a door. Oh, there's actually an introduction to the thing. Yeah. This Sif discusses putting up doors that are not swung open and shut on their hinges, but are put in place when one wishes to seal the entranceway, and removed when one wishes to open it. The passage focuses primarily on situations where the entranceway is opened on an infrequent basis. Then putting up the door gives a very strong impression of Baina, and the conditions that serve to permit using the panel, rod, or peg that we discussed above in the two prior seifim they're not enough. So the Shulchan Aruch now talks about the conditions that have to be met in order to use such a door. Yeah. So this is a door that's not sitting on its hinges. This is a door that you don't swing open and closed, but rather the way you go in there is and which makes sense because it would be it would be more common to have such a door on a thing that's infrequent, almost like think of like the. How like how sometimes there'll be like a wooden panel screwed into the wall behind that's on the other side of the wall from the bathroom plumbing, like an access panel. So an access panel, an access panel, you don't swing open, you don't put hinges and swing it open and close because you barely access it. When you need it, you remove it. So it's this sort of a thing. Mishna Berura Chav Hey Shahayo Lahem Tzir, that they had a hinge. Hainu Shenikar Shahayo Lahem Tzir. So this is going back to the doorway example, right? I mean the bookshelf example. So first of all, the bookshelf, if it's on its track or if it's on its hinges, there's zero problem. But now let's take that same example that you brought up with the bookshelf, right? And let's say it's disconnected from its hinges. So that in order to get there, but then again, I guess a bookshelf would be different because it doesn't look like binding because it's a keli. It has a different use. It doesn't really look like raw materials, does it? I don't know. Anyways, in the case where we're saying that it has that it has a hinge, it's not enough that it has a hinge. It has to be noticeable that it has a hinge, because our whole problem here isn't a problem of baina, of building. Our whole problem here is about the impression of baina, that it looks like building. So therefore, it's not enough that it has a hinge, but rather it has to be obvious. It has to be visible that it has a hinge or had a hinge. Let me just see first of all if there's any additional notes here. So we say therefore not the interval, since it's not usual to enter and leave through it. Beta halacha here cites Tesefes Shabbos, who defines the duration of a long interval in this context as 30 days or more. Chutshani on the rules that it must be used on a weekly basis. It's not enough even 30 days. The Tesefes Shabbos says 30 days equals tadir, on a regular basis. Chutshani says a weekly.
Interesting. So,
and I guess it's going to be.
So wait. So what are the two opinions? One says daily, one says weekly. Who are they?
Yeah, the Tesefes Shabbos says that it needs to be used every 30 days.
I'm saying is who okay, and every 30 days. Sorry, monthly. So Tesefes Shabbos says monthly, and who says weekly?
And the Chut Hashani.
Every.
The red string says.
Or the Chut Hashani. Shani is.
Yeah.
It's red. Oh, it's just.
Yeah, Chut Hashani. That's like the red string they have by Kei V'Rachel, the Chut Hashani. So, which somebody sealed off with thorns. We do that one called Dalid. Oh no, yeah, called Dalid. Hainu some b'chavili shel kaitzim asuya ke'indelis. So, meaning that he takes like bundles of thorns and he fashions it to look like to be like a door. And occasionally he opens it, and now he wishes to close it. The note is from the Rif in Eruvin, and it says that the door is merely meant to deter robbers or wild animals, and it is therefore not commonly opened. Chafhei shahaya lahem tzir, that they once had a hinge. Hainu shenikar shahaya lahem tzir. So this means it has to be recognizable that it has a hinge. Why? Because this also makes it evident, because it has to be evident, like we said. The whole point is about the impression. Even so, it's saying even if it scrapes along the ground, right? If it has a hinge or it had a hinge, even if it scrapes along the ground, as long as one tied them and hung them, it's fine, right? So this meaning to say, meaning that he hung them, not that he's hanging them now on Shabbos, but that he hung it already. He tied it and hung it before Shabbos, in order to use it for closing it on Shabbos. And therefore you're allowed to close it on Shabbos. That even though when it's opened, it scrapes along the ground. And only when he closes it, right, then he lifts it up and puts and puts it on top on the threshold. Still, since it's tied there, right, already from before the day, and it's connected there from before the day, and there is a recognizable place that there's a hinge, or that there was a hinge, which even more so says, hey, I'm a door. Therefore, it doesn't look like building on Shabbos. So he's requiring over here, right? So unlike where we spoke about before, it's essentially, in a way, it's continuing. Before we spoke about the builder's peg, right? That the builder's peg has to be tied. In this case, right, not only does it has to be tied, and B, additionally, since this looks even more like Beina, it has to have somewhere recognizable, either a hinge on it, right, or a place where it looks like there was a hinge, so that it looks like
Did you drop
this
this?
is a door.
Oh, thank you.
Notes are, let me see, E. Right, so they either currently have a hinge or it's evident they had one. The law of the door with the indication of a hinge is therefore similar to the peg we discussed in Sif 1. There too, one may use it as long as it is tied to the door, even if it rests on the ground when it's not in use. The Tehillah David, however, suggests that there is a difference between the two. The peg can rest entirely on the ground, whereas only one end of the door can scrape along the ground. In this case, it can't be such that it lays entirely on the ground. If, however, the entire door lies on the ground, it may not be put up on Shabbos. So he brings up there's a difference. It's not, even though you're saying like it can rest on the ground, but the peg was allowed to be whatever. It could be a mamish on the ground.
Along.
Yeah, this has to be on. This is if one end is on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they have door la door.
Door la door.
Full door of a door.
Full door.
Right.
So now 27 in the Mishna Berura. Gevayim min haaretz, raised from the ground. Let me just see where that one's from. That's.
So I think it's even if it doesn't have a hinge.
Now, right, if it doesn't have a hinge, a recognizable hinge, and it doesn't also have a recognizable place that there was a hinge, then you cannot use it unless it's higher than the ground, meaning it can't be dragging on the ground at all. Right, so meaning that before Shabbos he connected it and tied it. So again, this is the same idea. Is right. So we said a door is even more than a carpenter's peg. Why? A carpenter's peg you just have to tie, but the door has to also have recognizable hinges, and additionally, only one end can be dragging on the ground. If, however, it doesn't have recognizable hinges, that looks even more like Baina, and the only way you could use that is you have to tie it in such a way that it's that even not just when it's closed, it's not dragging on the ground. But even when it's open, it can't be dragging on the ground, not even one edge, because obviously before we're talking about even by one that has hinges, only one edge could be dragged on the ground. And even if they're higher than the ground, nima, even if they are only the width of a hair above the ground. Gemara. This comes from the Gemara. The hatam sheshuv ein anida kebeina b'neila zu af im ein lahem eketzir. And the reason is because since even when you open it, it clears the ground. It's not schlepping. So then, even without a hinge or the place where a hinge was, it is it's recognizable that you're not building. Hayil. Why? Because because even when you're opening it, it's tied well in such a fashion that it's not dragging on the earth. Yeah. Okay. Mishna Berura 28 Kayach. Yeah. Oh, Pesach Ha'asui. Let me just look back to what we were talking about there. Pesach Ha'asui Chavches is talking about so that all of the above, all of those things, these problems with a door is by a doorway that's not used on a regular basis. However, a door which is used on a regular basis, neither of those things matter. You could open and close it. It doesn't make a difference if it drags. It doesn't make a difference if it has recognizable hinges, because it's used on a regular basis. So you don't have the problem that it gives the impression of building. So since you use it on regular basis, everybody knows this is a door, and so it's not going to give the impression of building. Why? Because it comes across as a door. It's obvious this is a door.
Right.
29 Chavtas V'hu Nigrar, right? So he says so two things. First of all, it doesn't make a difference if there is a hinge or not, and also doesn't make a difference if it's dragging, but it's on the ground because you place when he opens it. So from the words of the mechaber, it implies that al kol ponim kosher mihu be'inan. Because so it would seem that even so it does need to be tied. So meaning you have a door, and so if you don't use it frequently, it has to be tied, and it has to have recognizable hinges, and it can't be schlepping on the ground. Or alternatively, if it doesn't have hinges, then it can't be schlepping on the ground even when it's open. Now, on the other hand, if it's used on a regular basis, it doesn't need hinges, and it's okay if it slaps on the ground. However, by the fact that the mechaber says that even if it doesn't have hinges and even if it's schlepping, but he didn't mention even if it's not tied, so it would imply that even a door that's used regularly, you would still have to tie it in place before Shabbos. It's just that when you tie it in place, it's fine if it has no recognizable hinges, and it's fine if it's schlepping on the ground. This is no problem, but it has to be tied into place. However, in the following sif in the Ramah, mashma the svidol da filu ain't kosher klal shari im yesh lo askupa milamato. So it sounds like from the Ramah in the next sif that if it has a threshold below it, right, and it's again we're talking about specifically, but when we're talking about a door that is used frequently, monthly or weekly, depending on the depending on who you ask. I guess when we get to the maybe when we get to the Alter Rebbe, he'll because ultimately in Minhag Chabad that's what we follow. So, when we get to that, hopefully the notes there will clarify what our final thing is for as far as weekly, as far as regular use. But so this thing that it has to still be tied according to the Ramon, the next Sif, it sounds like it only has to be tied if there is no threshold. But if there is a threshold, right? Because presumably because that in itself makes it obvious that it belongs there or something like that, because it's a threshold, it's a door. Then it's not a problem. And the Mishnah Berura holds that you can be lenient in this, meaning if it has a threshold, but it's not tied, you can rely on this. Ayin Bagira, see by the Vilna Gaon, Shekasav Shekain Huda Sarif Rambam, Ubifrot Shekain Sosam Harama. So the Gira says that this is the opinion of the Rif and the Rambam, that if it has a threshold, then you don't need the tying, and especially given that the Rama presents this ruling as well, even though he does not say from where, even though he doesn't attribute it to the Rambam Nirif. So in either case, the Mishnah Berura feels that we can rely on this.
Okay, Dalit.
Yeah, 1 second. Let me just have a quick look if it streeps along. Shulchan Aruch Harav adds.
Yeah.
So this is pertinent to us.
There it is.
That there is no concern for oihel in putting up a door, since it's temporary and it's vertical, right? Like we learned before, the problem with oil is when the thing that you're putting is horizontal. This is not a problem because it is vertical, and therefore only if it was a lasting thing is it a problem of a tent, of erecting a tent. Whereas since this is vertical, you don't have that issue, which may generally be put up on Shabbos. If you remember, like we said last time, so long as it's not creating a halachic domain. So long as you're not like a sukkah thing or things like this, so long as you're not creating a separate halachic domain, you are allowed to put up a vertical partition that is temporary. So that's why there's no issue of erecting a tent in the case of this seif with regarding doors.
Gotcha.
Okay, there are must states that a door that consists of many boards put together, as was typical in oldie-timey days. Even and we're talking about oldie-timey days to the Ramah. They may be put up on Shabbos, even if it is entirely removed from the doorway when it is opened, provided that the doorway has a threshold. Right. Okay. So that's where he gets. So that's I guess that's the next shift. Okay, Dalid.
Dalid literally starts off with Delis.
Dalid, yeah, it's which is out in the Nikud. This is Dallas. It starts off
Delis.
Yeah, Dalid. By the way, it's a funny thing because I know a lot of people think that Dalid is spelled Dalid Aleph Lamed Ayin Dalid, but Dalid,
right.
It's
not Yiddish.
Dalid is actually spelled Dalid Lamed Tuf. It's Dalit.
Dalit, yep, yeah. It's
Dallas,
a doorway.
Or Dallas and Sadi.
Dallas. All right.
Dallas, yeah.
Let's go to Austin. I mean Dallas.
Dallas.
So a door made from a single piece of wood, skufa, or there's no doorstep underneath, or I think
yeah.
talking about a threshold or mamish, something that protrudes, I guess. But basically, either way,
in this case, the threshold means that it's a recognizable. Remember, the whole point here is recognizability. The
Right.
hinge didn't make
Well,
a
either way,
difference
he's
if
about to
it's not
explain.
recognizable. It means it's a recognizable
Basically,
threshold.
bottom line, kishapoischin sumtin oisa, that when you open it, you're basically removing it. You're totally removing it. Oy noyelin ba. So then you can't lock it. I feel yes, let's hear, even if it has a hinge. So now that Amma adds, Aval delis asuyim krashim harbe, but a door made from many pieces of wood. Sorry, that's allowed. You can lock it. Fuck, I've changed my sorry, even though you're totally removing it entirely. Kisha Paischin, when you open it, im yashla askufa. If there is a doorstep, then a multi-door thing, yeah. And the same is true when the door is locked, with many boards, in which the boards are inserted. They go up, they lock into place above. Ulamata. So whether it's the top and bottom,
So
if there's a groove in the top and bottom, that the boards are inserted into, then it's okay. Shadinam, because their laws are kedeles, are like a door, like a regular door. These boards that are inserting into the doorway, they're like a door. Since it is not comprised of a single board. Since it's not a single board, so then they're treated like a bunch of doors for some reason instead of construction.
And he gets that from the base Yosef.
Right.
So now we're saying everything we said above, right? Which that's why the Mishnah Berura brought that thing from here. But everything we said above, we're talking about there is no threshold. But if there's a threshold or there's a recognizable grooves, again, it's all about recognizability. So it's more recognizable. So the Mishnah Berura 30. Dalisa Osui, a door that is made, b'chulu, right? Hainu, it's made of one board. Hainu, meaning lefisha ein law tikune hadalis kishar delasis, being that it does not, it doesn't have the like the preparation of a door. It's not prepared like a regular door. Havi kisesima ba'olma. So it's like it's like an ordinary searing. It comes across as sealing of a gap of a space. Like I have a hole and I'm sealing it with a board, right? Almost like if I'm putting a piece of drywall on a veneer kebaina, and it looks like building. Umaydi kan, and we're talking here afilu bepesach ha'osi l'knisi v'tzir tadir. And now we are talking about even a door which is used on a regular basis. In earlier oldie-timey days, a door typically consisted of a series of boards which were connected to each other. Right? If you think not only that, not only the oldie-timey days, think of like a national park outhouse. Right? They have like that wooden door. What's the wooden door? It's made out of boards that go vertically, right? Vertical boards, and then you have like two beams that go across it, and all the boards are nailed into that to the two ones going horizontally, and then your hinges are on the ones that go this way, and then the whole board, or it can be on the first board, I guess. But in either case, so that's how the doors were made back then. A door made only of one board thus gave the impression of a panel used to make a building. Even a hinge is insufficient to remove the impression of it being an ordinary panel. And it may not be used even if one has hinges on it. This is unlike the door in the seif above. That in that case, the role plays the hinge play it plays a role in permitting its use. Why? Because that door was the door that we're talking about in the last seif is not. We're not talking about a single board. We're talking about a series of boards, a mat, a bundle, like the bundle of thorns, which is not typically used in construction. So therefore, with those things, even if they look less like a door, but they also look less like construction, whereas here a single board looks more like something that you would use, at least back in their days. Nowadays, you could almost think of it of like, let's say I was using a piece of drywall as a board, as a door. So that's that. So back then, using a board, a single board to close a door. Interestingly, it could be that maybe now that it's not common to use boards like that in construction, maybe it would be different since the whole thing is because of impressions. So it's a single, and nowadays it's common really to have. I think you can continue this. Anyway, that's the Taz. The Taz, which we'll go more in depth on the Taz when we get to this. When we go into the Shulchan Aruch with the Taz and Magen Avraham. But that's the brings of the Taz. All of this is inapplicable to contemporary doors, which are typically made with one board. Nowadays, it's usual to make a door that way. In fact, generally, a high quality door, wooden doors, a high quality door is made of a single piece of wood. That's one of the marks of a high quality door, is the fact that it's made from a single piece of wood. Note, however, that putting a door back onto its hinges on Shabbos is a biblical level transgression of Baina. So here, what we're talking about is the door is a door, and it's disconnected from the wall, and it has hinges which make it recognizable that it's a door. And you're just sticking it in its place, right? Either either it's hanging, or alternatively it has a threshold, as in this if. But we're not talking about you're reconnecting the hinges, because reconnecting the hinges, those hinges are made to be there permanently. That is actually a biblical transgression of Baina. So when we're talking about hinges, it's very important to not confuse this with, what's the problem? It looks like a door. Like I'm allowed to screw the hinges in on Shabbos. No. That's a biblical level prohibition. What you are allowed to do is we're talking about whether you can just put it and remove it, put it and remove it, put it and remove it until who is it, David the Ray? What's it called? Until you can call him to come after Shabbos. And of course you can't call him on Shabbos, as we know, but after Shabbos you call David and he'll put your door up the way it needs to be. But in the meantime, you're just using it to open and close. However, on Shabbos, you're not allowed to put the hinges in, to put the hinges in place, because that is actually baina. Why? Because you're making an addition to the door, and it's meant to be. It's meant to stay that way. Is that Yankala and Didi?
Yep. You never saw that picture.
I never saw that picture. That's from the oldie-timey days.
That's before they became from.
I just saw Yankel last night. We were learning the Sikha from Chukas Bolok and Yud Beis Tammuz. It fell out like this year on the Shabbos.
How come I wasn't there last night?
Why? Because if you've ever tried to connect to the Wi-Fi at Hirsch's house, you'd understand.
Okay. No problem.
It doesn't. It's on the deck. It doesn't reach. And
Gotcha. No problem.
His modem or whatever it is at the front of the house. It just doesn't reach.
So that's your Uncle Ndidi. That's in the beginning days. Long time.
In the oldie-timey days. Wow. Anyways,
gorgeous folks right there.
Continuing.
I want that picture, Yehuda. Your background. I really thought he was there, and then it hit me. I said, "That's his background, you idiot."
We're going through an Israel theme right now. But anyway, so moving right along.
Yeah, so all of this is inapplicable to contemporary doors, which are usually made of one board. However, note that it's very important that putting a door back onto its hinges on Shabbos is a biblical level transgression of Baina, since the door is meant to remain there indefinitely. That's a permanent. That's the very definition of permanence. I'm installing a door. It's made to be there. Furthermore, the door is muktzah, right?
Why?
Meaning, I assume he's talking as Shulchan Aruch taught. Even a door comprising of a series of boards may not be put up on Shabbos if the doorway has no threshold. Why? Because you have to have. In other words, if you have a door, right, and it's not installed, and you didn't think about installing it before Shabbos, and you didn't make a siman, you didn't say, okay, I'm hanging this here, or I'm sticking it on the threshold and putting it there. It's not a door, meaning it's an unusable door without its hinges, unless you had a mind to use it temporarily like that before Shabbos, right? That's why in the earlier we said, like, when you have to tie it, not you have to tie it on Shabbos, you have to have tied it there before Shabbos. Otherwise, it's muktzah, it has no use. You can't, since you can't use it that way. It's a problem of muktzah, which means anything here that you have to do to it has to be done before Shabbos.
Wow.
And then you can open and close it on Shabbos. Here, even such a door gives the impression of a permanent addition to the structure, since it does not look like it's being placed placed in an entranceway. Fine. B, as seen in 3. This is what B. So here he's talking about even if you're going on a regular basis, you still need this. This because why? Because what is it? Because the door that's made of a single board doesn't feature. Okay. This greatly reduces the impression of a door being a permanent addition to the structure. Shulchan Aruch holds that it is nevertheless insufficient in our case, where the door is a single plank or the entranceway has no threshold. So meaning in addition to the fact that it's, even though it's used on a regular basis, and even though like we learned in the above seif that a door used on a regular basis does not have the same stringencies as a door that is not used on a regular basis, it still has to have a threshold, or alternatively, if it's a single plank also, because it looks more like baina, which again does not apply in our days. But I guess what would apply in our days is, let's say you're using a piece of drywall as a door. So that would be like the equivalent of what he's talking about here, using a board, because the piece of drywall is not usually used for a door. It's usually used for building. So in our days, like a piece of drywall would be the equivalent.
But every door has a threshold.
No, it's talking about a recognizable thread, because the whole issue here is it's a matter of recognizability. Miluach echad, that it's made from, if it's made from one board. She'ein, let me just go word lamed aleph. So we're talking about, right? So either if it's made out of one board, which makes it look like it's building, or if it doesn't have a threshold, which also makes it look like building. So you cannot use it even if it has hinges. Das Rambam, according to the Rambam, it's only prohibited if it has both of these problems. A, it doesn't have a threshold, and B, it's made out of one board. That if it's made out of multiple boards, it's obvious it's a door. If it has a threshold, even if it's one board, it's obvious it's a door. So according to the Rambam, you need both of those things. The Hainu shehum miluach echad v'gam ein lo askupa, that it both is made from one board, or let's say in our days, if you're using a piece of drywall, and it does not have a threshold. But in doors that you go in and out of regularly, the achreinim paskin that we can rely on the Rambam we can be lenient like the Rambam, that only in the case that it both looks like a construction material, like let's say it's a piece of drywall, and additionally it doesn't have a threshold, then it's prohibited. But if it's a multi-boarded door or something that looks like a door, let's say multi-boarded door. By the way, he doesn't really mean a multi-boarded door. What he means is if it looks like a door, if it's something that looks like a door that would commonly be used as a door, then even if it doesn't have a threshold, you could use it to put it in and out. Or alternatively, even if it's say a piece of drywall that you're using for that, but it has a threshold that makes it obvious it's a door, it's an entryway. So the same thing. So we can rely on the Rambam. Oh, lamed beis ukeshepeschin. How did I get always no lamed beis? Sorry, not lamed hey. 32. And when you when you open it, you remove it and you put it on the ground. So he's saying this you can't do. Mashma mizeh, so it implies that he's talking about if it's not tied, because if it's tied, how are you placing it on the ground? So obviously here he's talking about if it's not tied. But if it's tied and hanging, or it is scraping on the ground, when you open it, meaning the bottom end of it is touching the ground, shari, it's okay, even though it does not look like a regular door. Why? Because we're talking about a doorway that is made for regular going in and out, and therefore it would be fine, even if it's a door or something like that, if it were tied. But here we're talking about what if it's not tied? Then it's a problem. Then we have these problems above. Lamed Gimel 32. Let me just see if there's any notes to that. Okay, so first of all, you have, let me see. Where's C? Where does that go to? So the fact that the Achreinim allow us to rely on the Rambam, that it could have, that as long as it has one or the other, the threshold or the or it's a multi-boarded, or it looks like a door basically, that we can lean. This is based on a combination of two mitigating factors. One, the Rambam permits putting up a door if it lacks one of these components, even if it's used infrequently. And two, Magen Avram cites the Bach, who permits putting up a door even if it lacks both components, if it's meant to be used frequently. So since this thing is a rabbinic prohibition, right? Because it's not actually building. It's the rabbinic prohibition of it gives the impression of building. So we can allow the use of the door that lacks only one of those components and is also used on a frequent basis, as combining with that the Magen Avram would allows it on the basis that it's used frequently. In addition to the fact that the Rambam allows it, if it allows it based on if it only has one of these things, either it looks like a door or it has a threshold. The Chazon Ish states that one would be allowed to use it even if it's not tied to the wall. The Ramah here permits using a door that is both a series of boards and whose doorway has a threshold, even if it's not tied. So the Chazon Ish extends this even to the door that lacks one of those components. So that which we could be makel like the Rambam, that which we could be lenient like the Rambam, is talking about even if it's not tied to the door. So now we said that when it's open, so it implies that the Shulchan Aruch is talking about this whole thing is when it's talking about obviously it was not tied, and it's permitted even though it doesn't have the proper features of a door, because it's used on a regular basis. The Sharatzian based on the Gira. Oh, this is based on the Gira within the Rif's version of the Gemara, Eidovin 101a, which is that a widowed door, it's called a widowed door, that does not scrape along, meaning that it is not tied. According to him, we are referring to an entranceway made to be entering and exited on a regular basis. Since why? How do we know that? Because if it's a door that's used infrequently, then the fact that it is a widowed door is irrelevant. Even a typical door used on an infrequent basis is not allowed to be put up if it's not tied, as we saw before. So that's why, according to the Gera's understanding of the Rif, the practical difference between a typical and widowed door is where it's used on a frequent basis, but not when it's used on an infrequent basis. Okay, now 30. What's E? 33. Mam Gimel. Afal Pisha Shemtin, even though you remove it. Hainu Sheinik Shudakol, it's not tied at all. Afal Gav, the Bereshiv Gimel Bedel Shal Rechavam. Even though in the beginning of Seif 3, we said by a door that goes to like outside. Shagam mistama asuya kishar delasis. That even though it's like made like regular doors, but even so, we are machmir, we are stringent. That you have to tie it and hang it from before Shabbos. But here we're talking about a different scenario. Here we're talking about where you enter and exit on a regular basis. And in this case, it does not need to be tied at all. Yeah. The Yesh Hakiko, and it has, we said, right, it has a groove, right, that you have the boards and you put them in the groove. Meaning that these grooves, they serve the same purpose as a threshold. It's even if it has no threshold, but it has these grooves, then it's fine. Why? Because it's the same point. The bottom line is it makes it recognizable that it's an entryway. 35, Shadinam Kedelis, that the boards then have the status of a door. Right, so I mean to say the Afal Gav the Hakiroshim Einam Mechubarim, even though these beams are not connected at all. And he's sliding in each board by itself. He's taking a board, sliding into the grooves, taking a board, sliding into the grooves, which really looks like a lot like building. However, this is different than it's not considered still. So you would think that this is like the single board.
So it's groovy.
It's very groovy. It's groovy. It's groovy on the upside and on the downside. It's groovy all over.
Okay.
So yeah. So in this case, you would think, wait a second, we just said that using a single board is looks like, I mean, again, this doesn't refer to in our days that we don't really use boards that way, and doors are different and boards are different. But wait a second. We just said you can't use a single board because it looks like a construction. So what's the difference if I'm putting in individual boards? So he says no, but it's all the same. It is not considered to be a door of a single board. Lamed Vav Hayil ve'enon. Hayil ve'enon. What were we talking about there? Because they're not one board. right? We already, like we said above, that the Achreinim are inclined to rule leniently. That this is the same as a doorway which has a threshold, and therefore it's the same idea and it's recognizable, and therefore you can be lenient in this case. And that ends Siman Dalid. It will continue, God willing. I think Yehuda Leib is going to be on the road, so maybe
I'm on the road tonight. So that's Hashem tomorrow morning.
Okay, very good. So Mitzvah Hashem tomorrow morning. So if hey,